The video had been viewed 11 million times when Emily Carter finally realized the boy she had humiliated in front of everyone might be gone. She had watched the clip dozens of times. Every time, she heard her own voice. Every time, she saw the same moment. Daniel Reed standing in front of hundreds of students with a bouquet of roses in his hands. His nervous smile. His shaking voice. And then, her answer. "Daniel, stop embarrassing yourself. I would never date you." The crowd had laughed. Someone had recorded everything. By morning, Emily was famous. People called her confident, savage, fearless. The girl who had rejected a boy without mercy. But 3 days later, a police officer handed Emily a folded piece of paper. Her name was written across the front. Emily Carter. Inside were words that made her entire body go cold. Daniel had written, "Emily, this isn't your fault. Please don't carry my pain as your punishment." She dropped the letter. Because until that moment, she had thought she was the villain of Daniel's story. She didn't know the truth. And the truth was much more complicated. Emily Carter was 22. She lived in Boston, Massachusetts, and studied media and communications at Boston Harbor University. Emily was popular. Not because she tried to be. It simply happened. She had a bright personality, thousands of followers on social media, and a talent for making people laugh. She created short videos about college life. Sometimes they were funny, sometimes emotional, sometimes completely ridiculous. Her followers loved her honesty. They called her the girl who says what everyone else is afraid to say. Emily liked that reputation. It made her feel powerful. But there was another side of her. One she rarely showed online. She was terrified of being vulnerable. Her father had left when she was 12. Her mother worked constantly. Emily had learned early that depending on people could hurt. So she built a rule around her heart. Never let anyone have enough power to break you. She didn't know that one day, that rule would break someone else. Daniel Reed was 23. He studied architecture at the same university. He wasn't famous. He wasn't athletic. He didn't have thousands of followers. He rarely posted pictures of himself. But he had something Emily didn't know how to recognize at first. He noticed people. When a classmate looked tired, Daniel asked if they were okay. When someone dropped papers, he helped pick them up. When a professor stayed late, Daniel brought coffee. He was the kind of person who quietly made life easier for everyone around him. And he had been in love with Emily for almost a year. Not because she was famous. Not because she was beautiful. But because one rainy afternoon, she had smiled at him when everyone else had walked past. It happened outside the university library. Emily was struggling with a stack of books. One slipped from her hands. Daniel caught it. Got it. She smiled. "Thanks. No problem." She looked at the book. "Have you read this?" Daniel nodded. "Twice." "Is it good?" "It's depressing." She laughed. "Then why did you read it twice?" "I didn't say I was smart." She laughed again. That tiny moment stayed with Daniel. To Emily, it was nothing. To Daniel, it became a memory. Over the next few months, they became friends. Not best friends. Not a couple. Just friends. Daniel helped Emily with a difficult statistics assignment. Emily helped Daniel choose music for a university presentation. They sometimes ate lunch together. They joked. They talked. But Daniel began developing stronger feelings. Emily noticed. She simply didn't feel the same. And instead of telling him directly, she avoided the subject. That decision would later haunt her. Daniel's life wasn't as simple as it looked. He had been struggling privately for years with depression and feelings of worthlessness. He had a counselor at the university. He had spoken to his older sister, Megan Reed, about some of his struggles. He was trying. Some days were good. Some were extremely difficult. Emily didn't know any of this. Most people didn't. Daniel had become very good at hiding pain behind a smile. But there was one thing that made his difficult days feel lighter. Emily. Not because she was responsible for his happiness, but because he had convinced himself that being loved by her would finally prove he was worth loving. That belief was dangerous. And he didn't realize it yet. One Friday afternoon, Daniel finally decided to tell Emily how he felt. He planned everything. Not because he wanted to pressure her. He simply wanted to be honest. He bought a small bouquet. Nothing extravagant. Just white roses. He wrote a short message. And he asked her to meet him at the university courtyard. Emily arrived with 2 friends. What's going on? Daniel smiled nervously. I wanted to tell you something. Emily immediately understood. Her stomach tightened. She didn't want to hurt him. But she also didn't want to date him. Daniel took a breath. I've liked you for a long time. Emily looked around. Students were everywhere. Some were already watching. Daniel continued. I know you don't owe me anything. I just wanted to be honest. He held out the flowers. Emily stared at them. For a moment, she could have simply said, I'm sorry, Daniel. I don't feel the same way. That would have been enough. Instead, she panicked. She saw people watching. She imagined the rumors. She imagined being called the girl who secretly liked the quiet guy. And fear took control. Emily laughed nervously. Then she said, Daniel. He waited. She shook her head. I would never date you. Someone nearby laughed. Daniel's smile disappeared. Emily continued. Seriously, don't do this. Another person laughed. Someone pulled out a phone. Daniel looked down at the flowers. Emily's voice became sharper. You've made this really awkward. Silence fell around them. Daniel slowly lowered the roses. I'm sorry. He turned away and walked. The entire conversation had lasted less than a minute. But that minute would change both their lives. That evening, a student uploaded the recording. The caption read, When he thinks he has a chance. The video spread quickly. 10,000 views. Then 100,000. Then 1 million. By the next morning, Emily was everywhere. People praised her. Comments appeared. She destroyed him. Respect for being honest. That rejection was brutal. She didn't owe him anything. Emily laughed at first. She even reposted the video. Her follower count jumped. 20,000 new followers in one day. She told herself, I didn't do anything wrong. And technically, she had every right to reject Daniel. But there was a difference between saying no and humiliating someone because other people were watching. Emily didn't understand that difference yet. Monday came. Daniel wasn't in class. Tuesday, still absent. Wednesday, his seat remained empty. Emily noticed. She tried messaging him. Emily, hey, are you okay? No response. She sent another. Emily, I'm sorry things got weird. Nothing. She stared at the screen. For the first time, the viral video didn't feel funny. Thursday morning, Emily received a message from an unfamiliar number. Megan Reed, Daniel's sister. We need to talk. Emily's stomach tightened. They met at a small cafe near campus. The relief was overwhelming. Then why? He wrote this before he was hospitalized. Emily slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. She expected anger, blame, hatred. Instead, Daniel had written, Emily, if you're reading this, please don't think you caused everything I'm feeling. I was struggling long before that day. I made the mistake of believing that being loved by one person would fix everything broken inside me. That's not your responsibility. But I hope one day you'll understand that words can stay inside someone much longer than we expect. You didn't owe me love. I only wish I had remembered that my life was worth more than one person's answer. Please don't carry my pain as punishment. I hope you become kinder, not because you owe me anything, but because someone else might be standing where I once stood. Daniel. Emily couldn't breathe. She read it again. And again. Then she started crying. Emily opened her phone. The video had now reached 11 million views. The comments were still coming. She watched herself reject Daniel. But this time, she didn't see confidence. She saw a frightened girl who had cared more about looking powerful than being kind. Emily deleted her repost. Then she contacted the original uploader. Please take the video down. The person refused. Why? It's going viral, Emily replied. Because there's a real person behind it. The answer came. That's not my problem. Emily stared at the message. For the first time, she understood how quickly the internet could turn someone's worst moment into entertainment. The next morning, Emily posted a video. No makeup, no music, no dramatic editing. Just her sitting in front of the camera. She said, I rejected someone. That was my right. But I handled it cruelly. I embarrassed him because people were watching. That was wrong. She didn't reveal Daniel's private medical information. She didn't ask people to pity her. She simply said, if you're watching the original video and laughing, please remember that people aren't content. They have families. They have private battles. They have feelings you can't see. And before you turn someone's pain into entertainment, think about what happens after you stop recording. She ended the video. Then she put her phone away. She expected hate. Instead, millions watched. One comment appeared beneath her video. It was from an unknown account. I was bullied in college. Everyone laughed. Nobody knew I was going home and crying every night. Another said, I wish someone had told me that my worst day wasn't my whole life. Another, thank you for saying this. Emily cried. Not because people forgave her, but because she realized something. The story wasn't only about Daniel. There were thousands of people watching who had been humiliated, rejected, bullied, ignored, or forgotten. She couldn't undo what happened. But maybe she could do something with what she had learned. Meanwhile, Daniel slowly began recovering. His sister visited every day. His counselor worked with him. Doctors helped him build a safety plan and connect with ongoing support. His life wasn't magically fixed. There were still difficult days. But he was alive. And that mattered. One afternoon, Megan sat beside him. Emily posted something. Daniel looked away. I don't want to see it. You don't have to. He remained silent. Then asked, is she okay? Megan looked surprised. You're asking about her? Daniel shrugged. I don't hate her. She hurt me. But I know she didn't cause everything. Megan smiled sadly. I'm proud of you. 3 weeks later, Daniel agreed to return to campus with Megan. He wasn't ready for crowds. He wasn't ready for the internet. But he wanted to finish his degree. Emily saw him across the courtyard. Her heart stopped. Daniel looked thinner, tired, but alive. She walked toward him, then stopped several feet away. Hi. Daniel nodded. Hi. Emily swallowed. I don't expect you to forgive me. I know. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Daniel looked at her. I know. She began crying. I'm really sorry. Daniel took a breath. I believe you. That was all. But somehow, it was enough. Emily wiped her tears. Can I ask you something? Daniel nodded. Did you hate me? Daniel thought about it. For a while. Emily looked down. That's fair. But, he continued, I hated myself more. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Daniel looked at her seriously. That's why I had to get help. He paused. I thought your rejection meant something about my worth. It didn't. It took me a long time to understand that. Emily nodded. I wish I had understood that too. Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe we both learned something. They didn't become a couple. Not immediately. They didn't suddenly fall into each other's arms. Life wasn't a movie. Daniel needed time. Emily needed time. Instead, they became two people who understood something painful about each other. Emily stopped chasing viral attention. Daniel continued therapy. They occasionally spoke. Sometimes about school. Sometimes about life. Sometimes about nothing. And slowly, the anger disappeared. Not because the past was erased, but because they stopped letting the past control the future. Months later, Emily started a university campaign called Think Before You Share. The goal was simple. Teach students that embarrassing someone's private moment for entertainment could cause real harm. Daniel helped design the campaign posters. Megan helped organize support resources. Gracefully, Emily gave credit to everyone. She never used Daniel's story for attention. She never revealed private details. And Daniel never became the face of the campaign unless he wanted to. That was important. For the first time, Emily understood the difference between telling a story and owning someone else's story. 1 year after the viral video, Emily received a message from Daniel. Only 3 words. "I need to talk." Her heart started racing. She called immediately. Daniel answered. His voice sounded calm, but there was something different about it. He said, "I found something from before the video." Emily sat down. "What?" Daniel took a breath. "A letter I wrote months before I ever told you how I felt." Emily's heart sank. Because if that letter was what she thought it was, then the truth would prove something neither of them had fully understood. Daniel's darkest struggle had started long before Emily ever rejected him. And the letter might finally explain why he had become so convinced that one person's love could save him. Emily Carter's cruel public rejection of Daniel Reed had gone viral. Millions had watched her reject him. But behind the viral video was a truth nobody knew. Daniel had already been struggling with depression and feelings of worthlessness long before that day. After a serious mental health crisis, he survived and began receiving professional help. Emily eventually learned that his pain had never been entirely about her. She apologized. Daniel forgave her. Slowly, they began rebuilding their lives. But then Daniel told Emily something that changed everything. He had found an old letter. A letter he had written months before he ever confessed his feelings. And that letter was addressed to Emily. Emily sat in her apartment, staring at her phone. Daniel's voice from their call kept repeating in her mind. "I found something from before the video." She had asked him what it was. He had answered, "A letter." She was afraid to ask what kind. Finally, she called him again. Daniel answered after a few rings. "Emily, are you okay?" "I'm okay." His voice sounded steady. "Then what did you find?" There was a long pause. "I found something I wrote during the worst period of my life." Emily's stomach tightened. "Do you want to talk about it?" "I think I need to." Another pause. "But I don't want you to think it was all because of you." "I won't." "Promise?" "I promise." Daniel took a breath. "I'll send it to you." A few seconds later, Emily's phone vibrated. A photograph appeared. It was an old handwritten letter. At the top were 2 words. "Dear Emily." Emily stared at them, then opened it. The handwriting was Daniel's, but it looked different from the way he wrote now. Messy, uneven, as if his hands had been shaking. The letter began, "Dear Emily, you don't know how important you have become to me. Maybe that's unfair because you never asked for that responsibility. I know you don't belong to me. I know you have your own life. But somehow, when I see you smile, the world becomes quieter. And when I don't see you, everything becomes loud again." Emily stopped reading. Her eyes filled with tears. She continued, "I keep thinking that if someone like you could love someone like me, maybe I would finally believe I'm not broken. I know that's too much to ask from another person, but I don't know how to stop hoping." Emily closed her eyes. She already understood where the letter was going. She didn't want to continue, but she did. Near the end of the letter, Daniel had written, "If someday I disappear from your life, please don't think you weren't important. You were one of the reasons I kept trying for so long. But I also know now that I can't make another person responsible for keeping me alive. If I ever reach a point where I believe there is no future, I hope someone reminds me that this feeling can change. I hope I ask for help before I make any permanent decision. I hope I remember that tomorrow can be different." Emily's tears fell onto the screen. This wasn't a romantic suicide note. It wasn't a message blaming her. It was something much more frightening. It was evidence of how close Daniel had once come to believing his life had no future. And it had been written months before the viral rejection. Emily called him immediately. "Daniel, I'm here. Why didn't you show me this before?" "I was ashamed." "Why?" "Because I thought if you knew how much I was struggling, you'd see me differently." Emily swallowed. "I do see you differently." Daniel became silent. "Not worse," she quickly added. "Just differently." "How?" Emily looked at the letter. "I understand now that you weren't asking me to love you. You were asking the world to give you a reason to believe you mattered. Daniel didn't answer. Then she heard him quietly say, maybe. The next day, Daniel met with his university counselor. Emily didn't attend. This was important. Daniel needed a space that belonged to him. He told his counselor about the old letter. I thought I was better. The counselor nodded. You've made progress. But reading that letter scared me. Why? Because I don't recognize that version of myself. The counselor smiled gently. That's actually an important realization. Why? Because you're beginning to understand that a thought is not a permanent truth. Daniel looked confused. The counselor continued. Depression can make a temporary feeling sound like a permanent fact. Daniel stared at the floor. I believed I was worthless. And now? Daniel thought for several seconds. Now I think I was hurting. The counselor nodded. That's a very different sentence. Meanwhile, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the letter. She replayed the viral video. Her voice. Daniel's face. The flowers. The laughter. For months, she had told herself, I didn't cause his depression. That was true. But now she realized another truth. She still had responsibility for her own behavior. She had humiliated him. She had turned a private rejection into a public performance. And that mattered. Emily opened her journal. She wrote, I don't want guilt to become another way of making everything about me. She stopped. Then wrote, I want responsibility to make me better. That sentence felt different. Guilt asked, how could I be such a terrible person? Responsibility asked, what can I do differently now? Emily chose responsibility. A few weeks later, Emily received a message from a popular online creator. They wanted to interview her. The subject? The viral rejection. They offered her a large payment. Emily declined. Then another channel contacted her. Then another. Everyone wanted the same story. They wanted drama. They wanted tears. They wanted the private details. They wanted Daniel's name. Emily refused. Then one producer offered her even more money. You could tell the whole story. Emily replied, no. Why? Because it's not only my story. The producer laughed. You're the famous one. Emily answered, that's exactly why I shouldn't tell it. Months later, Daniel decided he wanted to participate in Emily's university campaign. Not because he wanted attention. Because he wanted to say something he wished someone had told him earlier. The event was held in a university auditorium. Hundreds of students attended. Daniel stood behind the microphone. His hands shook. Emily sat in the audience. He looked at the crowd. My name is Daniel. Silence. Some of you may know me because of a video. People shifted uncomfortably. Daniel continued. That video was embarrassing. A few students looked down. But that's not the most important thing I want to tell you. He took a breath. Before that video happened, I was already struggling. The room became completely silent. I thought being rejected meant I wasn't worth loving. He shook his head. I was wrong. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Daniel continued. Someone saying no doesn't decide your value. Someone leaving doesn't decide your value. Someone not understanding you doesn't decide your value. Your life is bigger than one person. The audience remained silent. Then Daniel said, and if you're hurting, please tell someone. A friend. A family member. A counselor. A doctor. Anyone safe. Don't make one painful night responsible for your entire future. The room erupted in applause. After the event, Daniel stepped outside. Emily was waiting. You were amazing. He smiled. I almost forgot my speech. You didn't. I almost did. They laughed. Then Emily became serious. Daniel? Yeah, thank you. For what? For letting me hear the truth. He looked confused. What do you mean? I used to think your pain was something I had to carry. And now? She smiled sadly. Now I understand that I can care about you without believing I'm responsible for your life. Daniel smiled. That's exactly what I needed you to understand. Their friendship slowly became stronger. They talked about ordinary things. Movies. Food. College. Work. Dreams. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they laughed for hours. But they never pretended the past didn't happen. That honesty protected them. One afternoon, Daniel asked, "Do you ever regret meeting me?" Emily thought about it. "Sometimes I regret how I treated you. But meeting you?" She smiled. "No." Daniel nodded. "I don't regret meeting you either." As time passed, the internet moved on. New scandals appeared. New trends replaced old ones. The video that once had 11 million views became old news. Emily's follower count eventually stopped growing. And strangely, she was happier. She no longer felt pressure to perform a perfect life. She started creating content about real experiences: loneliness, friendship, kindness, the danger of turning someone's worst moment into entertainment. But she never used Daniel's private story without his permission. That boundary became important to both of them. One evening, Daniel returned the old letter to his sister. Megan looked at it. "You don't want to keep it?" Daniel shook his head. "No." "Why?" "Because I don't need to carry proof of who I used to be." Megan smiled. "Are you sure?" Daniel nodded. "I remember that person. But I don't have to become him again." Megan hugged him. "I'm proud of you." Daniel smiled. "Me too." It was perhaps the first time he had ever said those words without feeling like he was lying. There was still one thing Daniel and Emily had never discussed: the roses, the public rejection, the moment that had started everything. One rainy evening, they sat in a quiet cafe. Emily finally asked, "Do you remember the flowers?" Daniel laughed softly. "How could I forget? I'm still sorry." "I know. I wish I had just said no." Daniel looked at her. "That would have been enough." "I know." She looked down. "I was afraid of what people would think." Daniel nodded. "I was afraid too." "Of what?" "That you would reject me." Emily smiled sadly. "So we were both scared." "Yeah, that's why everything went wrong." Daniel thought for a moment. "Maybe." Then he smiled. "But everything after that went differently." 2 years after the original video, Daniel graduated. He received an offer from an architecture firm in New York City. Emily was preparing to move to Los Angeles for a media production job. For the first time since they had met, they were going in completely different directions. Daniel was excited. But there was sadness too. Their friendship had become important. On their last evening in Boston, they returned to the university courtyard, the same place where everything had started. Daniel looked around. "I can't believe this is where we met." Emily smiled. "I wish we could erase that day." Daniel shook his head. "No." She looked surprised. "Why not?" "Because if we erased it, we'd erase everything we learned afterward." Emily looked at him. "You're not angry anymore?" Daniel smiled. "I've forgiven you." "Completely?" "Completely." She smiled through tears. "Thank you." Daniel looked at Emily. "I have something to ask you." "What?" "If you could go back, would you change your answer?" Emily was silent. Then she smiled. "No." Daniel looked surprised. She continued. "I still wouldn't date you that day." Daniel laughed. "Fair. But I would say it differently." "How?" She looked into his eyes. "I'd say, 'Daniel, I'm sorry. I don't feel the same way. But I respect you.'" Daniel nodded. "That's all I ever needed." The next morning, Daniel left Boston. Emily watched his train disappear. She didn't cry until she was alone. Not because she was losing a boyfriend. She wasn't. She was saying goodbye to someone who had changed her life. Someone who taught her that words matter. That kindness matters. That rejection doesn't have to become humiliation. That guilt isn't the same as responsibility. And that sometimes, the person you think you hurt beyond repair can eventually become someone who helps you heal too. A year passed. Emily was living in Los Angeles. Daniel was working in New York. They stayed in touch. Sometimes weeks passed without talking. Sometimes they called for hours. Their lives changed. They grew. They met new people. They experienced new relationships. They became different versions of themselves. And neither of them needed the other to survive. That was the most beautiful part. Their connection had stopped being about rescue. It had become friendship. One evening, Emily received a message. It was from Daniel. Do you remember the old video? She smiled. Unfortunately, he replied. I found something else. Emily's heart skipped. Another letter? Daniel responded. No, a photograph. He sent it. It showed Daniel standing beside his sister Megan. He was smiling. A real smile. Emily stared at the photograph. Then another message arrived. I wanted you to see what I look like now. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She replied. Happy. Daniel answered. Exactly. That night, Daniel opened a new notebook. He wrote a letter. But this time, it wasn't a goodbye. It wasn't addressed to Emily. It wasn't about death. It was about life. He wrote, Dear future me. Remember the person you were when you thought one rejection could destroy everything. Remember how small the world felt. Remember how convincing hopelessness sounded. And remember that you were wrong. You survived the night. Then another. Then another. You asked for help. You accepted love from your family. You learned to stand on your own. You discovered that being rejected doesn't make you worthless. And you learned that your life belongs to you. Never give one painful moment the power to write your entire future. Keep going. Daniel. He closed the notebook. And smiled. Years later, Emily was invited to speak at a university event about online responsibility. She stood before hundreds of students. Someone asked, What's the biggest lesson you've learned from becoming viral? Emily thought for a moment, then answered, That attention isn't the same as connection. The room became quiet. She continued, You can have millions of people watching you and still feel completely alone. And you can have one person sitting beside you and finally feel understood. Another student asked, Do you regret the viral video? Emily smiled sadly. I regret the cruelty in it. But I don't regret what I learned. Because that mistake forced me to become more careful with other people's hearts. She paused. Never forget that the person you're laughing at online is a real person when the camera turns off. 5 years after the viral video, Emily returned to Boston. She visited the university. The campus looked smaller than she remembered. She walked past the courtyard. The place where Daniel had once held the roses. The place where everything had changed. Then she heard a familiar voice. Still thinking too much? She turned. Daniel stood behind her. Older. More confident. Smiling. Emily laughed. Still showing up unexpectedly? Apparently. They hugged. Not as lovers. Not as strangers. As two people who had survived something neither had planned. They sat beneath the same tree where Daniel had once confessed his feelings. Emily looked at him. Are you happy? Daniel smiled. Yes. Really? Really. Do you ever think about that letter? Sometimes. Does it hurt? He shook his head. No. Why? Because it's not a goodbye anymore. Emily looked confused. Daniel explained. I used to think that letter was proof of how broken I was. Now I see it as proof that I needed help. And I got it. Emily smiled. I'm proud of you. Daniel looked at her. I'm proud of you too. Before they left, Emily stopped. Daniel? Yeah. If you could give your younger self one sentence, what would it be? He thought for several seconds, then answered. Never let someone else's answer become the definition of your life. Emily smiled. And what would you tell me? Daniel looked at her. You don't have to be perfect to become a good person. You just have to be willing to learn. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. I needed that. They walked away together. Not toward a romance. Not toward a dramatic reunion. But toward separate lives they had learned to value. And perhaps, that was the happiest ending they could have received. But there was still one secret Emily didn't know. Before leaving Boston, Daniel had given Megan one final envelope. On the front were the words, For Emily only if she ever wonders whether I truly forgave her. Megan kept it for years. And now, after their reunion, she finally decided it was time to give it to Emily. Inside was only one page. One final message. And the first sentence made Emily cry before she even finished reading it. Emily, you were never the reason I survived. Years had passed since the video that changed Emily Carter and Daniel Reed forever. Emily had learned that a person's worst moment should never become entertainment. Daniel had learned that rejection did not determine his worth, and that asking for help was not weakness. They had gone their separate ways. Daniel became an architect in New York. Emily built a career in media in Los Angeles. They remained friends, but neither depended on the other for happiness. Then, during a reunion in Boston, Daniel's sister Megan finally gave Emily an envelope. On the front were the words, "For Emily, only if she ever wonders whether I truly forgave her." Emily opened it. The first sentence read, "Emily, you were never the reason I survived." Her hands began to shake. She continued reading. "Emily, you were never the reason I survived. And I hope you understand why I'm saying that. For a long time, I believed another person could save me. I believed if you loved me, everything inside me would become quiet. I was wrong. You couldn't save me because I was never supposed to make you responsible for my life. My family couldn't save me. My friends couldn't save me. Even the people who loved me couldn't do it for me. They could stand beside me. They could encourage me. They could remind me to seek help. But I had to take the next step. And I did. That's why I'm still here. Emily, I forgave you a long time ago. Not because what happened didn't matter. It mattered. But because I didn't want one painful day to control the rest of my life. You once rejected me in front of a crowd. Years later, I realized something. The crowd went home. The internet moved on. The video became old news. But I had to wake up every morning and decide what kind of person I wanted to become. And I chose to become someone who stayed. Someone who asked for help. Someone who learned to love himself before asking someone else to love him. Thank you for teaching me that lesson, even though neither of us wanted it. Please live your life without carrying guilt for mine. And if you ever remember me, don't remember the boy holding those roses. Remember the man who kept walking. Daniel. Emily lowered the letter. For several seconds. She couldn't speak. Megan sat beside her. Emily wiped her tears. Why didn't you give me this years ago? Megan smiled gently. Because Daniel didn't want you to read it while you were still blaming yourself. Emily looked at the letter. And now? Now he thinks you need to hear it. Emily laughed through her tears. I thought forgiveness meant forgetting. Megan shook her head. No. It means remembering without allowing the memory to control you. Emily looked toward the window. For years, she had carried that viral video like a stone inside her chest. She had apologized. She had changed. She had helped others. But part of her still believed she had to suffer forever to prove she was sorry. Daniel's letter finally released her from that idea. Emily called Daniel that night. He answered quickly. Hey, did you know Megan gave me your letter? I did. Why? Because you kept apologizing. Emily laughed softly. I did. Every time we talked. I felt like I needed to. Daniel was quiet. Then he said, Emily, you made a terrible choice that day. I know. But you've spent years making better choices. She closed her eyes. I still feel guilty. I know. How do I stop? Daniel's voice became gentle. Stop trying to punish yourself. She opened her eyes. What? Being sorry doesn't mean you have to hate yourself forever. He continued. If you really want to honor what happened, keep being kind. Keep thinking before you speak. Keep protecting people when they're vulnerable. That's better than suffering. Emily cried quietly. For the first time. She believed him. The next morning, Emily returned to the university courtyard. She stood exactly where Daniel had once held the roses. The campus was busy. Students walked past. People laughed. Cars moved along the road. Life had continued. Emily looked around. Years ago, she had believed that one moment could define her forever. Now she understood. A mistake could become part of your story without becoming your entire identity. She took out her phone. Opened the old video. For a moment, her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she deleted the saved copy. She didn't need it anymore. The past existed. She simply didn't need to keep replaying it. Meanwhile, Daniel's life in New York had changed completely. He was now working on a major architectural project. He had his own apartment. He had friends. He exercised. He traveled. He still attended therapy when needed. He had learned to recognize warning signs when his mental health became difficult. Most importantly, he no longer believed he had to hide his struggles. One evening, a coworker named Lucas noticed Daniel looking exhausted. "You okay?" Daniel smiled. "Not having the best day." Lucas nodded. "Want to talk?" Daniel thought about the old version of himself. The version who would have said, "I'm fine." Instead, he answered, "Actually, yes." And they sat down. It was a small moment, but it represented years of growth. Emily also changed. Her media career became successful, but she no longer chased attention at any cost. She created a documentary series called After the Camera Stops. Each episode focused on people whose difficult moments had been recorded and shared online. But there was one rule: no humiliation, no clickbait, no mocking titles, no revealing private information without permission. The goal was to show what happened after the internet stopped watching. The project became popular worldwide. But Emily never told the audience that the idea had started with Daniel. That story belonged to both of them, not to the internet. One evening, Daniel watched an episode. At the end, Emily appeared on screen. She looked directly into the camera. She said, "Before you share someone's worst moment, remember something. The internet sees a video. The person in that video sees their life." Daniel smiled. He knew exactly where those words came from. His phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Did you watch it?" Daniel replied. "Yes," she responded. "Too serious?" He smiled. "No. You finally learned how to use your camera." She sent a laughing emoji. For a moment, everything felt normal. And that was beautiful. The old rejection video had become almost forgotten. A new generation of students didn't even know who Emily Carter and Daniel Reed were. That was exactly what Daniel wanted. He didn't want to be remembered as the boy who was rejected. He wanted to be remembered as an architect, a brother, a friend, a man who survived a difficult chapter. And Emily didn't want to be remembered as the girl who humiliated him. She wanted to be remembered as someone who learned from her mistakes. Both had escaped the identities the internet had created for them. One afternoon, Daniel received an invitation. He opened it. His best friend from New York was getting married. Daniel smiled. Then he noticed another invitation. This one was from Emily. She was getting married too. Daniel stared at the card. For a moment, he felt something unexpected. Not jealousy, not sadness, gratitude. Emily had found someone. Someone who loved the person she had become. Daniel sent her a message. "Congratulations." She replied, "Thank you." Then, "I'm happy." Daniel smiled. "Me too." And he meant it. Before Emily's wedding, she and Daniel met for coffee in Boston. They sat at the same cafe where Emily had once asked the waitress about him. Years earlier, that place had been filled with fear. Now, they laughed. Emily looked at Daniel. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had said yes?" Daniel smiled. "Sometimes." "What do you think?" "I think we would have been terrible together." Emily burst out laughing. "That's rude." "You wanted honesty." "Fair." Daniel continued. "We wanted different things. We were both young. And I was expecting you to fix something that wasn't yours to fix." Emily nodded. "You're right." Daniel looked at her. "But I'm glad we met." "Me too." Emily suddenly reached into her bag. She pulled out something wrapped in paper. Daniel looked confused. "What is that?" She placed it on the table. A small dried white rose. Daniel stared at it. "You kept one?" Emily nodded. "From that day?" "Yes." "Why?" She smiled. "I don't know." Daniel touched the flower carefully. "You should have thrown it away." "Maybe." "Why didn't you?" Emily looked at him. "Because I wanted to remember that I was capable of hurting someone." Daniel waited. "But also, that people can change." She carefully placed the rose back into her bag. "I don't need it anymore." She stood. "Neither do you." Daniel smiled. "Probably not." That evening, Daniel walked alone through Boston. He passed the university, the library, the courtyard. the bridge. Every place carried a memory. But none of them controlled him anymore. He stopped beneath a streetlight, looked at the sky, and took a deep breath. He thought about the boy he had once been. The boy who believed love from one person could rescue him. The boy who confused rejection with worthlessness. The boy who didn't know how to ask for help. Daniel whispered, "I wish I could tell you what comes next." Then he smiled. You would have been surprised. The next chapter of Daniel's life wasn't perfect. There were difficult days. Days when old thoughts returned. Days when grief became heavy. Days when he missed his sister. Days when he questioned himself. But he had learned something important. A difficult day wasn't a failed life. A painful feeling wasn't a permanent future. And asking for help wasn't a defeat. So whenever life became difficult, he reached out. He talked. He rested. He sought professional support when he needed it. He kept going. Not because he was fearless. Because he had learned that courage could exist alongside fear. Months later, Emily stood in front of a mirror on her wedding day. Her hands trembled. Her mother adjusted her dress. "You okay?" Emily smiled. "Yes." Then she looked at herself. She remembered the girl she had been years earlier. The girl who believed being admired was more important than being kind. The girl who had been terrified of rejection herself. The girl who had made one terrible choice. Emily whispered, "I'm proud of you." Her mother smiled. "Who are you talking to?" Emily laughed. "My younger self." After the wedding, Emily received a package. Inside was a framed architectural sketch. It showed two people walking away from a crowded place. Behind them was a large camera. In front of them was an open road. Underneath, Daniel had written, "Some stories don't end where they hurt. They end where we learn to keep walking." Emily stared at it for a long time. Then she placed it in her office. Not as a reminder of guilt, as a reminder of growth. Years later, a university student approached Emily after one of her talks. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Is it true that you once went viral for rejecting someone?" Emily smiled. "Yes." "What happened to him?" Emily thought carefully, then said, "He lived." The student smiled. "Are you still friends?" "Yes." "Did he forgive you?" Emily nodded. "Yes." "Did you forgive yourself?" Emily paused, then smiled. "I'm learning." The student nodded. "That's a good answer." Emily watched her walk away, then looked through the window. She thought about Daniel, about Sarah, about Megan, about the letter, about the roses, about everything that had happened. And she finally understood something. Forgiveness wasn't a door you walked through once. Sometimes, it was a road you walked every day. Years after everything began, Daniel was invited to speak at a mental health awareness event. He stood before a large audience. He didn't talk about Emily at first. He talked about himself. "I once believed my life could be measured by whether one person loved me. I was wrong. I once believed rejection meant I wasn't valuable. I was wrong. I once believed asking for help meant I had failed. I was wrong." The audience listened quietly. Then he said, "If you're struggling, please don't make a permanent decision based on a temporary moment. Tell someone. Ask for professional help. Stay around people who care about you. And remember, your life is much bigger than the worst thing you're feeling today." The room became silent. Then applause filled the hall. Daniel looked down for a moment. He thought about the old letter, the one that had once sounded like a goodbye. Now, his entire life was the answer to it. One evening, Daniel walked along the waterfront in New York. His phone rang. It was Emily. Hey, how are you?" Daniel smiled. "Good." "Really?" "Really." She laughed. "Good." They talked about ordinary things. Work, family, travel. Nothing dramatic. Nothing painful. Just two friends talking about life. After they hung up, Daniel looked across the water. The city lights reflected beneath him. He thought about how strange life was. A single moment could become a headline. A headline could become 1,000,000 views. 1,000,000 views could disappear. But a human life kept moving. That was the part the internet never showed. Daniel never forgot the day Emily rejected him. But he no longer needed to. It had become part of his history, not his identity. Emily never forgot the way she treated him. But she no longer punished herself for it every day. She transformed the lesson into kindness. And that was the real ending. Not a dramatic romance. Not revenge. Not guilt lasting forever. But two people learning that mistakes don't have to become prisons. Daniel learned. One person's rejection cannot determine your worth. Emily learned. Being right about your feelings doesn't give you the right to be cruel. And both learned. The internet may remember a moment, but people have to live the life that comes after it. Sometimes we think the most important part of a story is the moment everything falls apart. But it isn't. The most important part is what happens afterward. What do we do after the embarrassment? After the heartbreak? After the mistake? After the guilt? After the darkest night? Daniel chose to ask for help. He chose to stay. He chose to rebuild. Emily chose to take responsibility. She chose to learn. She chose to become kinder. Neither could change the past, but neither allowed the past to decide the future. And perhaps that's the greatest love story of all. Not two people falling in love with each other, but two people learning in completely different ways how to love life again. If you're listening to this story because you've ever been rejected, embarrassed, ignored, or made to feel like you weren't enough, remember Daniel's journey. Someone saying no does not mean you're worthless. Someone leaving does not mean your life has no meaning. And one terrible day does not have the power to write the ending of your entire life. If you're struggling emotionally or having thoughts of harming yourself, please reach out to someone you trust and seek professional help. You don't have to carry everything alone. And if you've ever hurt someone, you can take responsibility without destroying yourself with guilt. Apologize. Learn. Change. And do better. Because sometimes, the best apology isn't another 1,000 words. It's becoming a better person. If this story touched your heart, like this video, share it with someone who may need its message, and subscribe for more emotional stories about love, heartbreak, mistakes, forgiveness, and second chances. And tell us in the comments, do you believe people deserve a second chance after making a terrible mistake? Sometimes one person's life can change because someone simply chooses to listen. So before you judge someone's story, remember, you may only see 1 minute of their life. You don't know what happened before the camera started recording.